Hello, fellow endorsers of the art of steel. Parry riposte exchanges are not only fun, but they are essential for our fencing. So the when, the why and the how is what we are going to look at in this video. You can see me here against Valentin, my old fencing instructor from Gießen at Handelsschlag 2026 in Hamburg. And this is a very complex exchange actually, but it really shows what happens when both fencers respect tempo, speed and strength of their opponent. So I'm gonna give you now a quick and easy recipe to find your correct riposte. You firstly have to find in a Zufechten a tempo to initiate your first attack. Doing this, you still have to respect the tempo of your enemy, because otherwise he gets a chance to do counter-tempo actions. As the one who just got attacked, you can now choose the nearest or the easiest opening to attack for you and hit it with your riposte as a cut or thrust. Counter-riposting then basically works the same, but you have to in addition respect the tempo of your enemy and the rhythm that you both are fighting in. And if you have then established such a rhythm, you can of course deliberately break it and for example hit him with a nice thrust as you saw here. So as a parry riposte heavy fencer, you really have to keep up the pressure to not let your opponent have the time to find the correct index response to your riposte, which is most likely some kind of winden action or thrust. Okay, so now how do we train our parry ripostes? So let's get to the first part, which is the parries. Because parry riposting is such an essential part of fencing, you really have to be sure about your blocking, basically. This can be done by standing in front of a wall so you can't really move, and then just instructing someone to like do a Maya circle on you and just hit you from every side with their attacks. And you're focusing on long edge, short edge parries, and also parrying in the thumb grip, while maintaining good body structure and footwork. And yeah, it's freaking exhausting. If you want to make this a good club exercise, you can switch roles after a while so both get to do the parrying and both get to do the striking. And yeah, please don't stop if you get like hit in the hands or anything, just continue, because this is a learning exercise after all. Then we are getting a little bit more into the riposting part. So you see here one strikes the other, he has to parry and can then take the time to find the correct riposte to the next opening of the enemy. And this basically, if you speed it up, it evolves into a parry riposte only easy sparring. When you're doing this, still focus on your footwork, on your good parries, and just search for the next opening that offers itself for your riposte. And yeah, obviously in this exercise there is no feelers or index actions allowed, because this will break the exercise basically. So how to apply this now in your sparring? It can be really difficult, as you see here, versus Felipe Mangusto, who is just an extremely quick fencer. If you are slower than your opponent, then you're not likely to get a parry riposte, because you cannot put enough pressure onto him to prevent him finding that correct index action. And maybe against someone who's just rank 7 in the world, that's not advisable. So reading your opponent and knowing when to apply the parry riposte is actually really important. So in short, if your opponent is relying heavily on single tempo actions, you can really exploit that by parry riposting. But if he's more prone towards more complex actions, then parry riposting might get you in trouble. Also, feeling out your opponent and maybe conditioning him to your parry riposting and then actively breaking that conditioning might serve you as a good strategy. To get into the mindset when to use parry riposting in your sparring, one of the best modes to get this to work is basically agree with your sparring partner to a technique-focused sparring. So you, for example, you agree to focus on cuts in your sparring. That will produce a lot of parry riposting. You can try to do a lot of binding and winding, or you can reduce intensity. So staying in a good 30 to 50% range might produce more interesting exchanges for you. Equally, you could change the mindset. So, for example, you could agree with your sparring partner that you both only take exchanges where you are pretty sure about you being safe and getting an opportunity to hit. This will also result in more mindful fencing and get you out of defaulting to always the same movement patterns. Speaking of movement patterns, we have now spent a long time training ourselves in getting into a pretty even rhythm of fighting. Now you have to learn, of course, how to break this rhythm. So this is really something that I can't explain to you in an about 10-minute video, because entire manuscripts have been written about this, and I think this is basically the core of mastering fencing. Learning different solutions to a problem from the sources or even out of practice takes a long time, and the more approaches to the same problem you learn, the more you learn about how to move when that problem occurs. And then you still have to go the extra mile and drill this into your muscle memory so you can do it as a reflex when the stimulus arises. So you don't have to think about the action, but your brain sees what's coming and instantly responds with the answer you learned. So all these indes actions, feelers, whatever, can of course be used against you if you fence parry riposte heavy, and therefore you should know them and know how to use them yourself, and even maybe know the counter to the counter. So there's many techniques that have many layers what can happen, like an algorithm, and the further you go into that algorithm, the more you learn about that specific technique. Then, if you feel comfortable applying these techniques against a more or less willing opponent, then you should of course try them in real sparring. Like, choose your intensity and then see if your movements, if your techniques work against an opponent that has no idea that you are going to fence parry riposte heavy for this sparring. Set yourself the goal to fence parry riposte heavy and see what happens. Sometimes you might get countered, then your movements might be a little bit too over-exaggerated and you have to be a little bit more snappy. Sometimes the opponent always seems to find the right answer to your attacks. So that means maybe your ripostes are too slow, you're thinking too long. You have to practice more to strike or thrust towards the next or nearest opening. And then I've got one more training method for you, which also produces a very high amount of parry riposte and also is very prone to using your indes actions, your feelers, duplieren, whatever. And this is continuous fencing. So you don't stop after hits, you just keep going. And you try to keep a sensible distance, so Sprechfenster distance or misura larga or something like this. And yeah, just keep fighting. And you will get a lot of attacks from directions that you didn't anticipate an attack before. You will get into a lot of scrappy situations, and solving these often requires to keep up the pressure on your opponent so he doesn't overwhelm you with attacks or steal your advantage. So now we've gone the whole way, from disassembling parry riposte into all of its components, learning how these components work, what you have to do to achieve it, and putting them together first into a focused training with different training exercises to improve certain elements, and then putting it all together onto continuous fencing and really stepping up your game with awareness and perception of tempo and measure. So in the hope that this video gave you a good overview of parry riposting, hold your swords firmly and until next time. Thank you so much for watching. Consider hopping over to my Patreon, where I regularly upload videos with a focus on Italian and German longsword, as well as more in-depth sparring analysis to elevate your HEMA to the next level. See you over there!